All right, Tati. So competing on customer experience is one of the last and only competitive advantages in business. So obviously, when I saw Udi Ledergor's post, who's the chief evangelist for Gong, about the 14 AI agents that the company has recently released, and he stacked ranked his top three that he came through with the conference and what he thought was the most interesting. The one that he picked was the one that I think is the most interesting as well, and I think you might find it quite interesting, is this notion of how do you build an agent within a business, 5 people, 100 people, 10,000 people, that collectively, more or less vacuums up all of the data, all of the information, and so on and so forth, and effectively disseminates that to quote unquote the front lines so that every human being in your business carries a shared understanding of each and every customer situation down to the individual executive level. That's a dream to say. And of course, there's a lot of stuff in between. But this is very real technology that is out in the wild right now. And Gong is, if you're not familiar, for those watching, Gong is the pioneer of call recording software. It's a fantastic category, and they've evolved massively over the years. And I got to say, I think it's beyond interesting, and I know you do too. But I would love to hear your take to kind of kick things off on when you hear something as magical as that, and it's super tangible, it is real. Where does your mind go in relation to how do you enable those agents to effectively be effective? And what kind of concerns or opportunities do you think that might exist around the data itself?
No, thank you. I am super excited about this when I start seeing this because this becomes the real application, right? The conversations that once this becomes more disseminated, once it becomes real for people, our conversations, my conversations with people, your conversations with people become so much easier because you can see it, right? This is what it does. We're talking about the agents and what they can do. It sounds so pie in the sky at times for people, right? This is, oh, it's going to do some big things, but this is
Yeah.
really not going to affect me because I have my work and I have this sorted out and I don't, I got this, right? What is it going to do? Is it going to make things faster? I heard this so many times the last month. Well, what is it going to do? It's just going to make things faster. I don't need that much speed. Number one, I'm going to disagree with that. But number two, that's really not what it does, right? I would add one thing to what you said earlier. Customer experience is not just the last frontier on the ability to create something meaningful and to create loyalty, but is also the sustainability of it that is the very last
Mhm.
way, the very best and the very last sort of way that we need to, and for as much as we've been talking about our last 10, 15 years, very few have figured out. I was in three different instances the last couple of weeks when someone asked me who's doing this and who's doing an amazing job with it, and then I'm giving examples of places that are doing it an amazing job with some smaller pieces of it, but the overall, we're still got such an opportunity there. But that's just to start this. I'm excited. We talked about specifically the three: the briefer, the tasker, and the trainer. And the
Mhm.
one of the most persistent challenges that you've had in my career in working with teams is this knowledge fragmentation. You have this everywhere,
Mhm.
and that dreaded, like, oh, I'm sorry, let me check with my colleague. Or even worse, the most dreaded one for me is, well, who did you speak with last time? Do you know who you spoke to? And then you're scrambling to trying to find
It's
out who
like,
spoke
is
to,
that person in trouble?
which is normally irrelevant, by the way, because at that point, if you're asking me who I spoke to, it's probably sounds like you can't solve my problem. It's a combination. You can't solve my problem. You don't believe me. There's all sorts of issues there with customer experience, but um, that to me is the number one in terms of the briefer is that it's not just the time savings. You're really looking at that at the bottom line of this, you is a institutional memory that you're creating, and this survives
Mhm.
employee tenures. It survives. I talked to Susan last week, but she's on vacation this week, kind of thing, right? But well beyond that, you're able to take charge of your brand. And also, when you're thinking about if your brand wants to, there's so many bigger picture implications of this. If you are speaking with somebody and they want to take the brand in a different direction, which most brands I was also having a conversation this week with someone about how brands need to evolve and they need to create different avenues and opportunities, even if they were tremendously successful. So to make a really long story short, this is exciting well beyond the tangible deliverables. So it is truly, I don't even know what they're charging for it, but it's truly a bargain if this can happen right now. On the other side of this, specifically picking on the briefer, it's the challenge that comes to my mind as an operator for so long is you have all these touch points, you have several people, and you have the entry, data entry points that varied in quality, quantity, and existence everywhere. So my question on this will really be, what are we doing? What are they doing? How does that support work instead of being just a layer that comes atop and says, hey, I'm going to take all of this and transform it into intelligence? What if the ingredients in my fridge are expired? Not good, they're not enough. They're not, because essentially what this is saying is, hey, we're going to take everything that's in your fridge and we're going to come up with a great dish, right? And it's going to be fantastic. And, we can feed your whole family every day kind of thing. Who's making sure that's, and there's so many ways in my mind, and I love to dig more into this, but there's so many ways in which they can go deeper and help trigger those flags and trigger those responses to say what constitutes good information. What are the marks? What are the markers on that information that will say, yes, this is good information. When you're collecting that from customers, these are the things that you should have. I can't tell you how many times that it's happened, and you and I have talked about it at length about various brands where you call someone and they're fantastic and they get all the right information and they solve your problem, and some other folks ask you 3 questions, they don't solve anything, you got to call 5 times. There's no consistency in that still. So this enhancement of the human interaction and this transforming, the human to bringing the human to superhuman requires that human is well positioned.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm going to build on that a little bit and shout out Igor, who always talks about augmentation, not automation, in regards to human plus machine collaboration. And I think one of the things that perhaps would be helpful for folks that watch this and that are listening is think of it in terms of what Tati just said and this role of a human in the loop, right? So we're all going to figure out how to use this technology to augment what we're already doing. And yes, there's dimensions. We're going to, delegate, some stuff to the machines that we can just have the machines handle and they automate it. And therefore we just freed up 20% of our bandwidth, and that's fine. But the real opportunity is the augmentation. And so to your point, Tati, like you've got a super nuanced feel for customer experience in so many different dimensions of it, as do people on your team, and the taste, right? Almost thinking of it like a music producer versus the artist and so on and so forth. And I think where I get super excited for the market is when something like this comes out from a player as substantial as Gong, because to your point, number one, it's not bulletproof. I haven't used it. I'm not going to go there, but it is a very substantial and very sophisticated, incredible company that's putting stuff out in the wild that people are now using to solve meaningful problems that ultimately create killer customer experiences and value and loyalty and all those good things in a sustainable way. So that's the first bit. But the second bit, I think, with humility is it has a silver bullet. You don't just like put it in and like press the button and we're done. I think that there's going to be a new class of jobs, frankly, and roles that are going to be these humans in the loop that have sensibilities that are one part technical, a little bit of CX, a little bit of operator. And I wonder how you might think about that as, someone, with extensive experience in the space and not necessarily a technologist. But here's a question for you, just off the cuff. Like, when you think about the nuance of the job and what makes for world-class customer experiences, and obviously be meticulous and attentions to detail, et cetera. But like, what do you think would be really cool for AI systems and humans to collaborate in and around to unlock that kind of killer customer experience? And it could be as basic as foundational fundamentals, or it could be like imagine if and something outrageous. So I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'll leave that to you.
Oh, I have thoughts for sure. Uh, well, there are three, three key areas in which, when I think about AI and I think about this, that I get really excited about. The first one is around the standardization of what I call minimum viable experience. What's the minimum
Yeah.
viable experience? And AI can truly help not only implement that across channels, but it can also help the human in the loop, the person, the expert, refine further, distill further what they want it to be, test out different things, do A/B hypotheses and tests and things where they say, all right, this may be, because and you have to have that human in the loop. By the way, this cannot be. I as excited, as psyched as we are, and I am about AI. The human in the loop is crucial for this to happen in the way that it needs to, because that direction, that sensibility, and to be able to scale that sensibility, you need someone at that wheel, or at the very least providing the directions to a degree. So I say that that's one that's really, really big for me, is how do you standardize this, you create that minimum viable product, and as you expand to other channels, other products come in, other lines, other sectors, other markets, that's where that becomes your sidekick to really make that happen in a meaningful way. That's gonna call out all of the holes you have in your plan, all of the areas in which you need to do better, all of the areas in which others be able to provide in real time what has worked, what hasn't worked. So with that sensibility, those two things working together is absolutely powerful. The second piece that I think that's incredibly important is the consistency, because one of the things that, if you talk to anyone who's listened to this, who's a customer experience expert and worked in this, consistency, and it sounds a little basic and boring, but consistency is the key to success. You can go back, we can have a whole episode about Disney and how that's been their key to success, and being the beacon of service in the entertainment industry and hospitality for so long. You can talk about Ritz-Carlton, you can talk about Four Seasons, you can talk about retail, big retailers, you can talk about Dior, you can talk about so many of the places where that is at the center of what they do. And so having consistency is another place where you can create guardrails, really meaningful guardrails with AI, with your team, so it helps them, so they don't need to think about it. And so scaling is possible. And that brings me back to a point that you made earlier. This is also the way in which we scale the high touch experience without proportionately increasing headcount. Because you do this across channels, because you do this in a different way. You don't need, yes, you need people, but and we've been saying this all along, you need people in the right places. You don't need people doing basic tasks that AI can take over. You don't need more people because you're going to have a low rate of return, and you just need more people, so you get a minimum, the base of what you need. You need people in the right places. So this fundamentally changed that. And the third thing, which is also super important, is personalization. AI is so fast and it's such a phenomenal assistant, if you will, to that advisor, to that person that's on the other side, whether it's we're talking about a completely digital experience, or a brick and mortar experience, or a hybrid experience. The personalization, the ability to say, hey, based on all the information I have of Alec, here are two things he might like. Here's what it might be interesting for him. And I might have arrived at that conclusion on my own if I'm really smart and really, really connected, but it would have taken me 100 times longer, 10 times longer, whatever, even if you have the best systems, it would have taken me longer. It wouldn't have been as complete. And then I'm really leaving it up to having, and I don't think, as much as I love to say that every single team is performing at a super high level out there, it's a bell curve, right? So the ability to transform, and the way I think about it in a nutshell, my summary of all of this is that AI takes that beginning of that bell curve, which is those super high performers, and creates a model in which you can put the entire staff, and maybe even not as many people dedicated to that to achieve those same results, to offer the same level of service.
I love it, and I'm gonna play the technical nerd for a hot minute, just in case someone listens to this and says that is super compelling. What could I do? What does the system look like from a more like a technical architecture perspective? So we're in a moment in time where so much is possible that used to sound like a far-fetched story, right? A art of the possible. Oh my gosh! So playing it back, Tati, what you're describing is an AI system that has a really big brain that has unified and centralized all sorts of critical data associated with existing customers and prospective customers and patterns and insights that the brain, the AI brain, can feed to the human beings that are on the front lines interacting with the next Alec that's going to walk in the door. I was like, oh, what's up, Coughlin? How you doing? Good to see you. How's Julia? This, that, and the other thing. Winston. And not in a way where I'm creeped out. It's like, no, this is Greg and this is Rachel. These are the folks I always talk to when I come by every 6 weeks, to check in on what's new and what looks cool and this, that, and the other thing. But it's just helping them remember because they might have 150, 250, 350 relationships of that nature. And so the thing that I love about that is when I walk in, I don't have to remind someone that, I have certain preferences that are pretty specific. So they're not showing me something that I want, to buy that I can't afford, I can't fit into, I can't this, that, the other thing. Like that's just like, it's a waste of time, right? Or doesn't match up with my kit. If we're talking electronics, right? The stuff we're using right now to record this, or we can go in 17 different directions. So the first thing is you're unifying data sets that enable you to create a much more data-centric architecture so that, shout out my man, John McIntyre from Relational AI, his quote, all him, not me, but basically you're moving from like this silo data environment into a more data unified, data-centric architecture that then unleashes an ensemble of human and machine or AI agent collaboration. And therefore, to your point, Tati, these customer experiences, the consistency is just astounding, right? Because everybody around, has all this complete information that they otherwise might not. And the photographic memory of the brain is ensuring that even the littlest of little things are always, front and center when folks are providing this personalized experience on a one-to-one level in the real world or otherwise. And I think that's what makes this stuff so cool, right? And we're seeing it with Gong. It's like, hey, 14 agents, here we go. And Udi stack ranked him, and I think we agreed with number one, and I'm guessing number two and number three out of the 14. I haven't looked at the other 11, but I'm sure they're great.
No, we did. We do agree, and I'm excited about all of them, to be honest with you. And I think that this is exactly what we've been advocating as well. To say, hey, listen, we're not talking about ripping up your entire operations. We're saying, take something smaller, right? Take a modular solution, a modular tool that solves a very specific problem, and you start iterating with it. You start testing. You start working on it, and you move fast. And you jump to those modular solutions in ways which, if you really think about all of this, and in the way that these integrate in such a different, that's one of the things I think we need to. It's still. I would love to see folks out there, and I'd love for them to come talk to us as well about how to best describe how different this integration is to an operator, to a CEO, to a CXO, to a COO, to a CFO, to be able to
definitely the CFO.
Definitely the CFO. So they understand how different this is from everything they have, which we won't name names, but there's a specific system out there that I got to implement 3 times in my prior executive roles. That is a beast, and it's fantastic when it works, but it takes years and millions of dollars. And when we're talking about these tools, we're talking about something completely different. And I don't believe and I can say this with the confidence of speaking to so many folks in this industry, do not believe that that's clear, that that's something that is understood well at how, and it's, you have to jump, and that's one of the ways. Another thing we're saying, you have to move fast. You have to move fast. You can't create an entire, and yes, it has to be, I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't have to be connected with the entire objective, and the entire strategy for the company. But you cannot, this is not something you can wait for your company to do, the 2-3 year 5-year plan, bring in all the big consultancies and do, and no offense to the big consultancies, but it takes time, and you can do that in parallel, but you gotta jump on these modular tools now. They won't, and the majority of the cases, it's not going to be a conflict. And even if there is a better solution, which there will be, by the way, in all of these cases, in 6 months, in a year, there will be a better solution. By the time we get to the other side of this, you've already realized your ROI, your bottom line, your top line. Like that's what's different about this, and that's what I've been so passionate about. I do want to say one more thing before we go, because it's your story. I was here thinking about, you laugh at this, because 10 years ago, you and I, as usual customers of a certain membership-based location, would sit and talk about, shall not be named, a membership based,
Shall
a
not be
series of
named.
locations around the world, and we will come in, and we will always, kind of laugh, kind of be upset about the fact that they didn't know who we were, they didn't know who the member was, they didn't have any preferences recorded. How cool would it be for you to come in and for them to recognize you immediately, if it wasn't already from you coming in and having some sort of facial recognition to say, to greet you as you walked in. Let's say we skip that step, and it's even one further. When they put you your name, Mr. Coughlin, so nice to see you. The table that you like is available right now. Let's take you over there. Would you like an order of your favorite meatballs and your, the drink that you have, and however you have your coffee? And this right now, and this is 10 years, 10 years ago, we're having this conversation. At that time, this was possible through a little bit of technology and a lot of training and customer experience focus. Today, this is available to us with a little bit of training and technology in a very real way.
I'm going to jump all over that, and I'm definitely not naming names, but I am an odd dude in that I do not like raw tomatoes on my sandwich under any condition, but I love salsa, I love cooked tomatoes, etc. And so at that same location, every single time when I've got to mention that, it was always like, I just don't understand how can, or I'm allergic to shellfish. I obviously am not going to, order anything in the shrimp and the crab and the, et cetera category. I will give a shout out to, a place that I'm beyond loyal to, Chipotle. Anybody that knows me, they know I'm a 2-3 at least day a week Chipotle guy. And shout out to Chipotle in that every time I pull up, the app likes to notify me that, like, I don't know, there's some alert and it knows I'm in physical proximity, but I'm like, Chipotle, take it one step further. I get the hard shell tacos. You know what I get every time. You can see it. Because I'm loyal. I scan it. I like the free entree. I don't know. It gets me excited. I get something for free, So shout out to Chipotle. But yeah, Tati, you're right. It is 10 years ago, and I'm going to say something for the CFO. So I really hope a CFO, hears this one, because this is the trigger, right? 10 years ago, when we talk about this, that, and the other thing, the whiz bang and all the value that can be created by the digital transformation and this, that, and the other thing, eventually the CFO hears the dreaded term. And the dreaded term is replatforming, right? And so the replatforming is taking a very significant technical component part of your Lego building blocks, for those that aren't technical, and swapping it out Jenga style and putting something in that's quote unquote 10 times better. There's a ton of risk. There can be 8 figures of capital in play. And I can almost guarantee it, if we challenged ourselves to this, I bet you we could find 2 or 3 scenarios that 10 years ago would require the replatforming, the time, the risk, and the 7 to 8 figures, versus today, that's a $25,000 to $50,000, maybe $100,000 killer POC and pilot that's lined up directly with a value chain that you can then build into behind revenue and profitability, which makes the CFO so happy. And you can hold me to that as a homework assignment. If any CFO watches this and is like, hey, I want to see what Alec and Tati were talking about, I'm going to challenge you to kind of go ahead and give me those 3 use cases. Challenge accepted if somebody challenges us to do that. And I think we would do a great job. But as always, Tati, speaking of great jobs, these conversations are killer. I love it. We're missing our mate Steve, but he'll be back next week. But yeah, thanks as always. Anything left that you want to drop into this before we hit the road?
No, I just, yeah, thank you. These are fantastic, and I think these are such important topics for. I said it so many times, for operators, for the CX leaders, and we love the interaction. So to your point, tell us what you want to see. We can have. I was thinking now you're talking about the 3 use cases. We can find 30 use cases just with LangChain, by the way, of things that have happened
100%.
out there that we were like, wait, how did this happen? What was it? 90 days? Something that would have taken years, right? And it's just a different way. I learned a long time ago that there was always more than one way. This is one of the biggest leadership lessons, that there's always more than one right way to do something. And this is the invitation here, I think, with all of what we're talking about, and we'd love to have more of that interaction, is like, what are some of these other ways that, and so many of these companies have been doing so well for so long with what they've done, and have managed to, despite all the challenges and the replatformings and all of that, still, despite all of that, they managed to make that work. What if that making it work can be faster, easier, less costly, and really open up your team and your productivity towards something that truly transforms your business? And that, I would say, just as my final thought, that was I'm most excited about.
I agreed. And the only thing I'm going to add to that is it's enabling humans to do what we do best. Let the machines do what they do so you can create killer customer experiences. All right, Tati, as always, a pleasure. See you soon.
See you soon.